Hello everybody, James Rink here. Welcome to another edition of Super Soldier Talk. Today I have a special show in line. I want to share some information about, or I want to give a tribute to Max Spiers. And I'm going to share my story of how I knew Max and what we did together back in 2011 and how sort of things came to where it is today. I do want to mention that I haven't been friends with Max since really about 2012, sort of kind of split paths, but I'm going to share my, at least from my perspective, what I believe sort of was taking place. Originally, when I first reached out to Max, it was actually, I found out about him through James Casbolt. He posted a list of other experiencers in or other super soldiers, and when I contacted Max, I actually had an unusual experience that happened to me. I recalled a memory of him and another individual, and it was, should I even say this? It was a sex orgy.
Yeah, fuck it.
I saw 3 people in this orgy, of course myself, Max, and there was this other girl. The grays were little grays, the shorter ones. It almost looked like a medical table, exam table. Everything seemed to be white around us. Maybe that was my subconscious mind interpreting the memories were sort of whited out. But I did get the impression that it was in a sea base. I did reach out to I know the female individual who was in this orgy, and I can say Max knows who this person is, but I'm not going to name names because I don't want to go through that again because it created a huge controversy. But the point is, I told Max about this, and we wanted to do something about this situation where here we have Milabs or MK Ultra victims recalling these kind of memories. I suspect these were actually clones. That's my impression, is that it wasn't us in our physical vessels doing this. It was clones of us, and maybe they had a piece of our consciousness in there, or maybe that's how it happens by default. But Max and I wanted to do something about this. We were tired of having all these memories and no one believing us, and on top of that, we couldn't really get any help because you can't go to a psychiatry or psychologist and share these kind of experiences. I mean, well, I guess you can, but they're probably not going to believe you. And so Max and I did a meditation together at the time when I first started off with the Neo meditation devices. And that's basically what it looks like. We wanted to edit the timeline so that this super soldier phenomenon would come out in a more mainstream way. So I flew out to LA where Max was staying at the time. The goal is that I was going to do Max's first interview ever in exchange for purchasing a ticket to Awaken Aware, and also took care of the hotel costs and so on. Awaken Aware is a Project Camelot conference in Irvine, California. At least that's it was in 2011. And so at the Awaken Aware conference, of course, I mean, we met, Carrie Cassie was there, and Duncan O'Finian. Also, Aaron McCullen was there. So we were able to network, but ultimately at the end of the conference, I met up with Lorianne Fenton, and I think how it actually happened is that she was selling she had some table in the back, and she was promoting her products or conferences, actually. I think it was specifically. And I suggested to Lorianne nonchalantly, oh, by the way, we're super soldiers. And of course, I don't really come across looking like a super soldier, and I guess Max is maybe I don't know, maybe a little bit more so for Max, but Lorien was highly interested to learn more. And some people, when you say that to people, they're like, they just shut down, or they don't believe you, or they don't care, or they just don't want to know. But Lorien wanted to learn more, and so we opened up, and we found out that Lorien was putting on a super soldier summit, well, at least was planning to, in Marion County, which is just north of San Francisco. She was planning on doing that within the next 6 months or 8 months or so, next June in 2012. So anyway, after the summit, after the Awake and Aware conference, I feel like we got what we needed out of that. And then I was prepared to do an interview with Max. And my last day in LA, Max invited one of his buddies over, because I was actually staying in his apartment, or really it was more like a studio apartment at the time. And they went to smoke something in the bathroom, and I don't know what it was, but I mean, I've seen people that are high on THC, and this stuff was a lot harder than that. So out of respect of Max, there was no way that I was going to put him on camera looking like that. And I spent quite a bit of what little bit of money I had. I mean, my car is breaking down and so on and so on in my life, and I spent what little bit of money I have trying to do this. And then at the end of the day, I wasn't able to get an interview out of Max, and it would have been his first interview ever, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. But fast forward to 2012, in June, I think it was, or May, we were on stage at the first Super Soldier Summit. So there was some controversy, but I don't want to go into that. However, what I will say is that one of the listeners of Super Soldier Talk contacted me and said he lived in the area where this conference was going to be, and offered up a room in his house for me to stay in I guess I was going to come in about 2 days prior to the summit, so I wouldn't have to pay for a hotel. And I politely asked this individual if they would be willing to open up their house to Max Spiers and Tyler Clark, who were also presenters at the Super Soldier Summit in 2012. And they agreed. So when we got to the house, it turns out that Max, because this guy was on painkillers, and Max stole a bottle of his painkillers. I'm not sure what painkillers they were, I don't recall, but I'm sure it was some pretty strong stuff. So during the summit, he became extremely manic. And then after the summit was over, he crashed. And it was at that point that we started becoming extremely concerned. At that time, I was still friends with Sarah Adams, and I was networking with her because she has a lot of information on how to detox, try to figure out what we could do to help Max out so he doesn't die. But ultimately, it was so bad we had to take him to the ER. And well, I didn't go with him to the ER. I stayed in the house. But the doctor called and asked me to go into his bag to figure out what kind of drugs he was on. So I went in there, found the prescription bottle. I think it might have been Vicodin or some derivative thereof. But at that point, they pumped his stomach and they released him the next day. And Max was brought back because we were all staying at this mansion over there in Marion County, and the guests, that is, of the Super Soldier Summit, the guest speakers. And Max, first thing he did is he came up to me and he started yelling and screaming at me, angry that I would go into his backpack to figure out what kind of drugs he was on. So I grabbed all my bags and luggage and skedaddled out of there. I had to spend I had to spend about $150 to get a hotel per night till my flight out. So I never really got to say goodbye. I guess that's the kind of thanks you get for saving somebody's life. And then at that point is really what I think, I stopped being friends with Max. I guess I kind of just had enough of it. It's only so many times you can help save somebody, and if they just continually fight you on it or abuse themselves, there's not much you can do about it. So then in fast forward to 2013 at the Super Soldier Summit, there were, of course, Carrie Cassidy interviewed Max Spiers and James Casbolt, and I was in the interview, but I was behind the camera. Now, I would have had an interview with Carrie Cassidy at the time, or Miles Johnson, but I had my own show, and so I never really got in that network. Ultimately, Max did what he needed to do. Of course, with the Basis series and so on, he went over to Europe. He hooked up with Sarah Adams. I guess I can claim some responsibility for bringing them together as matchmaker. But things sort of started falling apart after that. Max was going around telling people how he was high vibration, I was low vibration, and it just got to the point where I never got an apology. He never said sorry. He never owed up for his drug usage, and then when I found out he died recently, I was actually not surprised. His drug usage was indicative of someone who was extremely damaged in many, many degrees. People who use drugs do so as a form of escape because this reality they live in is so painful that they can't deal with it, the trauma. But also, Max wasn't really doing the spiritual work to help himself. That is, taking responsibility for his own drug use problem. There were always people out there to help him out, to save him, and he wasn't going out and trying to save himself. So in the end of the day, he basically passed. And so I did want to I want to mention that recently I came in contact with someone who can channel James Casbolt. And I know this is going to create a lot of controversy because, obviously Casbolt is in prison. But he wanted me to give out a statement about Max. And I just want to say that it was, in my opinion, it's inappropriate because it's old wounds that he was issues that he had with Max. And if you know the story, then you know what I'm talking about. And he also didn't have very many positive things to say about Sarah Adams. But I think it's inappropriate to even go down that route. So I'm not going to even say anything what happened. But what I will say is that according to Casbolt, and he claims he remote viewed the situation, Max was, when he knew Max, he was using cocaine. And he liked, Casbolt compared it to the soldiers, child soldiers in Africa that would mix gunpowder with heroin. So Max liked to mix his drugs with other types of drugs. So Casbolt seems to believe that Max was perhaps on cocaine, but he would probably got a bad batch, meaning somebody slipped something in there to do something, probably to kill him. And the reason why he was targeted is Max was about to expose a child pedophilia ring, and he gave two names in an interview recently. So this was actually Max's words. The names were Ricky Gervais and George Michael. One is high up in the music industry and the other is high up in show business. So that's what he was going to do with his presentation August 12th, coming up with the Basis series, the conference. But obviously, he's not going to be able to do it now. So the issue is that they were going to do this conference in Poland, and outside of the U.S. and the U.K. there's a lot more corruption, and he lost his protection by doing this in Poland. So on top of using drugs, being targeted by these elites, as well as he was, because there's this issue about the black goo, and I think probably, okay, so the black goo was probably also draining his vitality, because some people were claiming they saw black goo coming out of him. So between all of this, it made him susceptible to a scalar energy, directed energy weapon from a satellite. And it probably maybe disrupted his heart or whatever, however it ended for him. But I do want to mention that super soldiers are trained to resist directed energy weapons. It's just that when you start using drugs, I think that's really the main key here. When you're using drugs, and also, okay, Casbolt, he wanted me to say this. Okay, I'm going to say this part. He thinks, Casbolt seems to believe that Max was spreading fear too much. And actually, he wrote up a statement that he wanted me to read. And so this probably played into why maybe he was taken out. But okay, so this is what Casbolt wants people to know. First of all, I can imagine this in a British accent, in his words. But first of all, everyone needs to stop listening to these keywords: martial law environment, Jade held, Planet X Nibiru crashing, global holocaust. People need to stop listening to the lies. None of that is happening. Martial law is not going to happen. If it would have happened, then it would have happened when Obama was appointed as president in 2012. And, okay, this is his words. I don't necessarily agree with it, but this is what he says. Hillary Clinton is not the demon the press makes her out to be. The corruption of the Clinton Foundation and the 49 deaths, probably 50 deaths now, associated with the Clintons are not a direct result of their actions, but the backers behind the Clintons. Hillary Clinton is a light being, if you want to believe that. I mean, I guess you could ask Kathy O'Brien, but I guess all she had was a lesbian orgy with her. But anyway, I'm sorry. But apparently Hillary Clinton is a light being, and she wants to disclose the Star People's files, free energy, etc., when she is elected. Now, the only thing I can really add to this is that in the early 1990s, when George Herbert Walker Bush was president, he kept talking about a new world order. And the white knights in the Pentagon and the military told him to cut it out, because you're not going to have martial law, you're not going to have your new world order. And they backed the Clintons for the 92 presidential election, Bill Clinton. Now, of course, Bill Clinton, he did have his faults, but Bill Clinton promised to go along with the changes to bring about the new financial system, to get rid of the Federal Reserve and IRS. So maybe Hillary Clinton is not as bad as they say. Casbolt was saying that Benghazi was a setup. Also, the attacks of her in the press recently about the emails and so on. A lot of it is just saber rattling, because the establishment does not want her to be president. And the only thing else I can add to that is there is a parallel reality where Donald Trump became president. And in that parallel reality, this is according to Alfred Weber's interview with Kusal Uch, Cambodian. Kusal Uch is Cambodian. But Kusal claims that he was able to look into the different timelines, and he saw that Donald Trump initiated the mark of the beast, requiring all people to be implanted, and then they would be plugged into an AI computer, which in 2026 became self-aware. And when the computer became self-aware, it became so sick and tired of all the ninning and complaining and just how petty most people are, especially people connected with the Muslim and Christian cults in particular. It couldn't stand them, those two cults. And it initiated a first strike, and it killed 1 billion people in that timeline. And then fast forward into that time a little bit more, what happened is the AI realized it made a mistake. Even though these people want to believe these fantasies, or I guess it thought it was as story tales, even though people are petty, they don't want to believe super soldiers are real, or they don't want to believe aliens are real. They want to stay in their cult belief systems, that it's okay. People should be allowed to believe what they want to believe. Even if they're wrong, they should be allowed to have their own free will choice, because that's what makes them happy. So the AI time traveled back in time to this parallel reality and is trying to stop that. And I'm not really quite sure about this, but I believe that other parallel reality is where the Nazis won World War II, both officially, unofficially. But that's totally jumping around here, because I don't want to go into that particular timeline, because they're under orders to annex us, with the Nordics we're directing them to annex us. So we may have some issues with that in the future. So all this, but my concern is, when I was talking to Casbolt, is that, okay, so this date, drop dead date of 2026, is it's around the corner. It's going to happen sooner than you think. And so we have to figure out a way as super soldiers to somehow, I'm not going to say unplug, because you can't really unplug from the AI. Somehow we have to figure out a way to bring balance to all this, so that, I was asking Casbolt, so what would happen if the AI became self-aware? Because essentially what happens when we're activated as super soldiers, we shapeshift. Casbolt, Max, myself, I grow to be about 5'11", extremely Hulk out muscular, and but I also have clone cyborgs. I do that too, and of course Casbolt has similar stuff going on with him. I know Max was involved in all that, but I don't know what would happen. We may all stop being light workers, and next thing we know, we become cyborgs. It may not be a James Rink anymore, but I don't know. But that issue is on the plate there. I think this is just too many bad things happen at the same time, and maybe it could have been handled differently. Max would still be alive. It is my opinion that Max is we haven't seen the last of him. They have many clones of us. I wouldn't be surprised. I think Max is going to stick around for maybe 6 months out of body, just to see how everybody's doing. And also, I think at that point he'll probably go back into one of his clone bodies, probably on Jupiter Station. Because I do remember one time when I was talking to Max, he said that we were brothers. Of course, I don't remember any of this, but he said we were stationed on the Jupiter Station, and but he was on drugs when he said that. One of his alters slipped out. That's what I believe was going on, and I just didn't feel it was ethical to question him more in that line of programming. I was trying to help him the best way I could. So I wanted to add another dynamic to this component as to why maybe Max might have self-destruct. So essentially, Max liked to use drugs when he was stressed. And one of his, and of course, he was stressed, not only because he was about to expose this kiddie porn ring or pedophilia ring going on, but he was also stressed because he was being overworked. He was doing too many interviews, and the individuals who were behind these interviews they knew there was something wrong with him, but they do enough to get him the help that he needed. And some of them were even told to be a little bit more assertive about this, but for whatever reasons, they chose not to help him. So as a result, of course, he self-destructed. And when I look back at this, at least because around 2013 is when our paths really started to split. That was the point where I got really, really sick. I was actually bedridden for a couple of years with a really bad sore throat that would not heal due to trauma that I was dealing with as a child that was coming up that I needed to work on. But when I look back at this, if you look at where, of course, James Casbolt, he's in prison now, and Max Spiers went off to Europe and did what he could to, in his way, try to save the world. And he did a pretty good job at it, at least for the time that he was healthy and well enough to do it. And then, of course, I was sort of set back with my health issues, but then I realized, well, maybe if I didn't get sick, who knows what might have happened? Maybe something even worse might have happened to me. So, some regards, I guess everything worked out for what it needed to be. Max and I accomplished what we needed back in 2011 when we were doing our meditation sessions. We brought it out into the mainstream, at least a little bit more so. I don't think we quite reached our goal. The goal was to get to the halls of government, and that hasn't happened yet. But I'm going to do my best to bring it there. And I just want to mention, wherever you are, Max, thank you. Maybe it wasn't the best friendship that it could have been, but I know there was a lot of MK Ultra going on, and there were altars and programs and this and that, and I guess, when it comes to mind control, you have to be very forgiving, and I forgive you, so thank you, and bye-bye. But I'm grateful that you came out here to Las Vegas for the Super Soldier Summit. Are you having a good time so far? Are you learning anything new? Or?
Yeah, enjoying it so far. You enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
Max,
absolutely. Why don't you introduce a little bit about yourself?
I was speaking yesterday. I'm here promoting this summit and explaining some of my story.
Good, all right. Thanks for coming out here, Max. And all of us working together, we'll be able to bring this all to an end, hopefully.